Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another retro RPG. The end of another week and the end of another poll. We've got a very clear win for threats for Shadowrun. Now as usual I'll cover that in the desktop in a wee second, and I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other poll related stuff. But I'd like to take a moment to mention my Patreons, who this week have all maxed out their wisdom attribute, and a more serene, wise and clear-headed bunch you have never encountered. If you'd like to join them, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to become a real honest-to-goodness fake Laird of Scotland, or any of the other offers which will be increasing in the next couple of weeks, then please check out the Patreon in the description down below. But anyway, let's have a look at threats. So, this is threats. It's obviously for Shadowrun. It's more specifically for Shadowrun 2nd edition. It came out from FASA in 1996. And it's a guidebook to major threats in the world. You know, powers and conspiracies who are threatening the world order. Now, although it's for 2nd edition, there is very little in this which actually is tied to a rule set. This is all background information. There's perhaps a couple of stat blocks in it, but not much at all. So it'd be very easy to convert it and use it for other editions. What does tie it to 2nd edition, though, is that some of the threats contained within, some of the powers and things, include things like the insect spirits in Chicago. And it also mentions the way that will be used eventually to get rid of that. So those as threats are basically cast aside as time progressed past them. But there's still a whole load in here. It's basically edition agnostic, apart from maybe one or two places. But anyway, let's have a look at the back cover. Threats. Fact, fiction, paranoia. You make the call and pray you're right. They're out there, chumlies. You know they're out there. The puppeteers who pull the strings on everyone from CEO Damien Knight to the scroffiest born yesterday street rat. I'm talking bug spirits you can't tell apart from human beings. Magical cabals who want to make us all slaves in their mage-o-cratic utopia. Hate groups so powerful they make the megacorps look like kiddie crooks. Artificial intelligences jerking our chains from so deep inside the matrix that the hotted stacker can't reach them. They're taking over the world and no one can stop them. In fact, you might just be working for them right now. Threats describes 14 of the most powerful and influential people, organizations and entities in the awakened world of Shadowrun. These threats are the biggest of the big players, magical secret societies, mad scientists, astral monsters, and other frightening forces with the power to change the world. Gamemasters and players can decide which threats are real and which are lunatic fantasies from paranoid minds, or even create their own threats from using the guidelines in this book. Any threat from the sourcebook or from the Gamemaster imagination can become the ultimate villain in a single adventure or an ongoing campaign for use with Shadowrun 2nd edition. Now inside, we've got the standard very high quality artwork from FASA, and we've got the Shadowland version 2, which they'd moved on to by this stage. Now I liked the way they presented Shadowland before. I'm less of a fan of the version 2, which does not look more like a 1990s website, admittedly, but doesn't clearly project information. Now we've got the candidates page here, because this was during the election year. So the election was happening, and we've got Dunkelson standing as an independent. Talking about absentee ballots, buzz on the street, poll results, weird stuff. And that year was all played into it. So there was Super Tuesday, a bunch of adventures which led to the election where the players could get involved in stuff. Now I've covered that on the channel before. And eventually Dunkelson gets elected president and gets assassinated. And that leads to Dunkelson's Secrets, which is a massive trove of ideas for adventures and different things. Some of them are picked up officially, but lots of them are left to the side for Gamemasters and players to investigate. Tons and tons of great stuff. Now, the introduction, it talks through what this book is. As I've said, it's a selection of 14 big individuals who influence the world. How to use this book, using threats and designing threats. As you can see, it's very rules light. It's not really giving you anything for 2nd edition on how these should be used. It's just giving you ideas. And then we've got the Alamos 20,000, which have a nice swastika in their banner, giving you a clue what they're about. But these are the racists. Now, I've complained before that Shadowrun did move away from the critique it was in first edition of racial relations. But I really do like that they added it back in here. Now, admittedly, this is probably the last big mention. There's perhaps a couple of adventures where the Humanist Poly Club and Alamos 20,000 come into it, but this details a lot, and it makes them far more interesting, because it's giving you the people behind it. So we've got the Nazi. It doesn't give you information on exactly who these people are, but this is somebody who's the great-grandson of an SS elite officer. So, literal Nazis. We've got the Troll. Now, this is somebody who goblinized, became a troll, changed from human to troll, but before the Awakening. There were these spike babies and things where elves, dwarves, orcs and trolls were born before the Awakening, randomly. And this is somebody who was born, but before they knew what it was. He was just a mutant, an outcast. And that's led to his point of view, that other metahumans should be wiped out, that humans should be pure, that, he was this horrible monstrosity. We've got the Zealot, we've got the Senator, we've got the Loon. And all of these are competing, and we go into the game information, so using them in adventures, rules, the different factions within it. And it kind of details what each of these factions is trying to do as they try to take control of Alamos 20,000, and this larger group is pulled in different directions. So it's not clear to the players exactly who they're going up against, because they could be going up against one of the factions within. Then we've got Afraid of the Dark. Now this brings in a character from Harlequin's back. One of the powerful beings, like Harlequin himself, like Aaron the Scribe. But this is the opposite side, where they are eternal magic users, people from the previous spikes of magic, existing from the days of Earthdawn through to the future world of Shadowrun. Dark is the evil side of them. He has survived this, but he's trying to bring about the horrors and the bad stuff again. In Harlequin's back, he's one of the villains of the book, but this talks through how he's visiting people in dreams and driving them insane, and how to use him. He's a psychological menace, not a physical one. Although we do have stats for him here, he is an ancient sorcerer, so shouldn't just be used to slug it out the players. He's also got some creatures, magical beings, which he's brought through. Now, these are things which really shouldn't exist until the magic is much higher, and we are getting to the point where horrors would be walking the world and the intelligent races would have to defend the Earth. But he has managed to bring them through because of his loyalty to the forces which are coming, or to chaos, or however you want to phrase it. And he is dragged through these creatures in spikes of magic. Then we've got Winter Knight. It talks through their influence. They are basically powerful mages. Earlier this evening I killed my family. I shot them all, quickly and cleanly. Winter Knight won't have them. And how they manipulate people. This is a group who is trying to bring about the end of the world. They're organised around Scandinavian mythology. The great world-spanning battle that will destroy the old bloodthirsty Norse gods and usher in a new era of peace. So the Winter Knight organisation is trying to bring about the Winter Night, the end of the world, the destruction of the gods. And it talks how they're organised like terrorists into cells, how to use them, and how they are allied with toxic shamans, because they are wanting to corrupt and destroy the world. We've got the Vampire Conspiracy, which I can't help but read a bit as a reaction to Vampire the Masquerade and all that, because vampires in Shadowrun were very much just beasts. But the Vampire Conspiracy organises them, making them into a threat. And it mentions things here, if certain power-hungry players seem eager to have their characters infected with HMHVV, which is the vampire virus, and positively drool at the prospect of gaining vampiric powers, let them have it, and then basically let them have it afterwards, destroy them. But we talk through using the vampire conspiracy, the rules. Then we're on to Halberstam's babies. Now, this is a mad scientist. He is basically extracting children's brains, wiping their memories, and then connecting up to the Matrix. So these become extremely powerful in the Internet of Shadowrun, the Matrix, because they live in it like it's their real world. And it mentions in places how they are confused if you mention the real world. But these are incredibly mischievous spirits within the Matrix. We're kind of getting onto little kiddies horrifying people, but out of control. So we've got a section here using Dr. Halberstam and his babies. The babies himself ranging between 6 and 12. He has 4 to 6 children's brains in a vat at any one time. So what's happened to the children is absolutely horrific, but that horror is portrayed through them and what they pass on as well. Now then we've got KSAF. Now this is a very interesting one, because this really isn't a threat as such. This is a television station, but it's a television station that receives advice. So I believe it mentions things through here that they get told, record this doorway for the next 12 hours. Interview the CEO of Renraku. And when they're given this advice, some major story will break, or that footage will be required in some big story which breaks later. They are basically being guided from outside. So it's a very useful thing for Shadowrunners, because monitoring what KSAF are doing can be a guide to what's going to happen in the world later. They do not cover every story suggested by the sender. Their matrix system possesses several unique features. The people at KSF don't know the sender's identity, and I've only made on a few half-hearted attempts at finding out. So there's lots of hints in here of who it might be, but they don't care because it's making their television channel successful. We've got the Atlantean conspiracy. Now this is kind of a conspiracy of elves. It's delving back into older cycles of magic, and these people are trying to bring things back. It mentions how they are using magic in different ways, and they are predicting the cycle by knowing what happened in previous cycles. So the Atlantean Foundation, for example, advised the US government on the bug spirits emerging in Chicago, because they knew from previous cycles that magic would reach a certain level and the insect spirits would arrive. But they are trying to take control. This is the big elvish conspiracy. Here be dragons. Now this is a chapter on Lothwur. Now, the dragons in Shadowrun dragged themselves up out of the ground. They've been buried in their caves deep beneath the Earth's surface, and when magic became big enough or powerful enough to support them, they dragged themselves out and started becoming active again. Now, in certain ways, dragons have gone after a theme. So we've got Dunkelson, who becomes the president, then gets assassinated, as I mentioned before, but he is the media dragon. He has taken to communicating with people. He uses his power and influence to influence people. But Lothwur is the business dragon. He has taken over a massive corporation, the largest in Europe, and controls everything through that. He is one of the biggest players in the world. Like most powerful men and women, Lothwur considers himself above the law. He makes his own rules, as does any contemporary leader of a successfully legitimate or criminal business empire. He wields absolute control and conducts his daily life as if he is untouchable. And as far as the players are concerned, Lothwur pretty much is. There's lots of information here about how he manipulates the world, and how he manipulates other corporations. Lothwur is perhaps the biggest neutral player in the world. He's very much in favour of humanity surviving, but he doesn't particularly like humanity. We provide useful things for him. Then we've got bugs. Now, this is broken up by these nice colour plates. We've got pictures of insect spirits moving through the streets of Chicago. We've got Mr. Dark influencing somebody through their 3D video set. We've got Tutor, which we'll come to shortly. We've got Lothwer, well, his influence through the streets. Halberstam's babies, you know, the brains in jars in the background there. We've got vampires, we've got Winter Night, with their bombs that they plan to destroy the world, and Alamos 20k, the cultists. But then we're back into the section about insect spirits, and this is detailing how they've kind of changed during the events of Bug City. So we had the Grimoire introduce insect spirits, then we had Bug City bringing them very much into control of Chicago, but changing the way they work. But this changes them further. As the situation in Chicago is stabilizing, it mentions that perhaps it's because Chicago is now in winter, and insects are cold-blooded. So perhaps they are calming down because they just can't stand the cold. Lots of information in there, how to use these slightly different insect spirits and keep the idea fresh, so insect spirits don't become predictable. We've got the Blood Mage Gestalt. Well, as technology in Shadowrun is a big South American corporation, they basically control the nation based around the Amazon, and their big thing is blood magic. And this details out how the blood mages combine their powers together and act as one. So you get groups of blood mages joining into a gestalt and controlling everything. You know, as technology and blood magic, two threats intertwined by a double helix of purest evil. As technology is definitely one of the bad guys of the Shadowrun universe. Then we've got Black Lodge. This is a group of mages, basically magical supremacists. So unlike the elves who want elvish power, the Atlantean conspiracy, this is a bunch of people who believe that because you're a powerful wizard, you deserve to have more power. With the rise of magic created the awakened world, it was inevitable that people would assume the existence of a secret magical organization pulling the strings behind the scenes. And the Black Lodge is that. We've got the rules here. We've got chantries, so groups of the Black Lodge, the penultimate master, world influence, information about a typical Black Lodge because it's a magical group, which adds advantages in the grimoires. Then we're on to the human nation. This is very much like Alamos 20,000. They hate metahumans, orcs, trolls, elves, dwarves, absolutely despise them. This is a big group of racists. But it's slightly different because it's coming from something much older. If I can find the exact sentence, it basically mentions that this was formed long before the Awakening. This was back in the 1870s or something. And they believed in the power of rich folk against the masses. And now the ultimate form of the masses are the monstrosities of orcs and trolls who have goblinized. And we've got using them in campaigns, rules, and the Flaming Sword, made up of bored human nation members looking for a thrill by hunting down a few evolutionary dead ends. So the Flaming Sword go out and hunt metahumans. Perhaps specifically powerful metahumans like the Shadowrunners to prove themselves better. Then we've got Tutor. Now this is a very interesting idea. This is a free spirit. Now it appears to mages and tries to help them, but is destroying them by getting to extend themselves too much. And it goes through a story here, different dates. He says his name is Tutor. Interesting name for a spirit. But he's taught me the best spell yet. A binding spell that lasts until you take it off. Geez, I can't believe that what I just wrote. And he gets more and more magic, but then he starts getting weaker and weaker, and he discovers when speaking to a friend that they're also got a similar spirit to Tutor, although it turns out to be the same one. That the spirit is going through them, getting them to overextend. And its final sort of mentioning how to use it, the rules, is that it's a spirit which hates the fact that mages bind spirits and force them to do as they say. It's become a free spirit and it wants all other spirits to be like that, so it's out to destroy mages, and does that by tempting them with power. It's a very interesting idea. We've got Spirit Taps, how it taps their powers and causes them to overextend themselves. Tutor, a great form spirit in its stats. Then we're on to Strain 3. Well, this is the fat virus, which is eventually used to cleanse Chicago of the insect spirit infestation. This is a type of virus, but one that exists in magical space. In Shadowrun, you've got the real world, and then you've got astral space kind of above it and around it. The magical realm, where all spells are powered from. This is a virus that exists in that astral realm and consumes from within it. It will attach to spell focuses, it will attach to mages as they astrally project, or even just cast spells as they tap into the astral realm to cast spells. Now, you can protect yourself from it by not accessing magic at all, but that involves sort of shutting down your spell focuses, your power focuses, and not casting spells. And it's impossible to detect where the fat bacteria is. Now, this is later used, as I said, in Chicago, because the insect spirits are spirits, so are active in astral space all the time, and the fat bacteria attaches to them and feasts on them, basically putting them into torpor and killing them. But it also affects other magical beings. In Chicago, when Bug City comes to an end, it makes the big point that the ghouls of Chicago protected people, because they are still humans, even if they do need to feast on dead flesh. But they hated the insect spirits, but they were very good at fighting them, because they are magical creatures as well. But the fat bacteria wiped them out as well, because they were magical beings. And it goes through how to destroy it, using sterilize or cure disease spells in astral space, or denying it food. So if you shut everything down, you can deny it the chance to feast on you. And that's all the threats. Now, the fat bacteria is detailed out a lot more in the sourcebooks which follow. There's a corporate sourcebook which talks about how the corporations use it, and obviously the Chicago sourcebooks after Bug City ends detail about the fat bacteria, and they detail about the insect spirits, how all that changes. But mainly these can still be used. They are very strong stories, and even the insect spirits, it does mention how they are acting differently in different places, and how they are influencing different groups. Casting their shadows sort of into California and that. So, I think this is an absolutely brilliant book. They thought it was good enough that they did bring out a sequel to it, the imaginatively titled Threats 2. But there's so much in here, and as a Gamesmaster, it gives you so many ideas of things to throw at the players, and have the movers behind the scenes. So that was Threats for Shadowrun. And that won the poll this week on 32% of the vote, way ahead of anything else. In fact, in joint second position on 21%, we had Platt's Starport Guide for Star Wars, and Rift's Worldbook 23, Zitikik's Invasion. And we saved ourselves a full video of me fumbling over the pronunciation of that. So that's perhaps a relief. Anyway, behind them came Caravans of Mars for Space 1889 on 15%, and way back in last position was the Dark Tech Sourcebook for Dark Conspiracy, something I would love to have covered, but only got 12%, so once again, I've been denied. Anyway, they're all cleared out of the poll as usual, and this time we're going back to a Retro Adventures. And I'm definitely going for ones which have failed in previous polls, to try and get one of the games which is never successful through. So this time we've got Operation Rapid Strike, an adventure for Top Secret from TSR. Way back in 1980 it came out. We've got Slaughter Margin for the Judge Dredd role-playing game from Games Workshop from 1987. We've got Nightwalker the Villy Affair for the Magnificent Millennium's End. Came out in 1991. We've got Out in the Black, one of the few adventures for the Serenity role-playing game, and that came out in 2006. And we've got The Last Warhulk, again one of the few adventures for the Alternity game from TSR, and it came out in 1998. Now, I have a feeling I know which will win, but we shall see, because I am often wrong. But let's see what goes through. Another channel-related news, well, the Discord's trucking along. It's been very, very quiet last week. But on more associated news, I'm working on compiling some of my notes and putting them up on DriveThruRPG. But for Patreons of Librarian level, which already exists to share the articles from the Retro Magazine videos, I'll be sharing those documents with you. So if you're a Patreon of that level, Librarian or Laird level, you'll be getting free access to those. And that'll be accessible through the Patreon. On other stuff, well, I'm trucking along as normal with RPG Gamer, updating my way through. I've been doing the reviews for The Bad Batch, which I've now reviewed the last 2 episodes this weekend. The latest episode, The Mandalorian. But with The Bad Batch out of the way, I'm going to start doing Star Wars D6 stats for that season. And I'm going to be using the new method that I've been using, which is completionist. So I'm doing every little NPC, every little vehicle. Instead of just picking 1 or 2 things I liked out of each episode, I'm covering absolutely everything these days. So that's going to take a few weeks to get through. So if you'd like to have a look at that activity, head over to rpggamer.org and see it. But, as usual, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough. So thank you very, very much for watching. It is very much appreciated. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.